Mr. Whitmore, before we discuss this billion-dollar deal, there is something you need to know. You didn't lose me by accident. You lost me because you chose not to believe me. The room went silent. Julian Whitmore had spent 15 years mastering the art of control. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, faced down investors who doubted him, and walked into any room knowing exactly how it would end. But nothing prepared him for the woman standing across the conference table. Amara Bennett, his ex-wife. The woman he thought he had left behind forever. For a moment, Julian forgot about the executives watching, the presentation waiting on the screen, and the contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in front of him. All he could see was the person he once promised he would never abandon. Amara, he whispered. She simply looked at him. Calm. Composed. Different. Hello, Julian. 6 years had passed since he last heard her voice in the same room. 6 years since their marriage ended with unanswered questions, broken trust, and a silence neither of them knew how to cross. Julian looked around the conference room, almost expecting someone to explain how this was possible. The woman standing before him was the founder of Bennett Innovations, one of the fastest-growing healthcare technology companies in the country. The same woman whose proposal could determine the future of his own investment firm. The same woman he once believed had betrayed him. I didn't know you were leading this project, Julian said. His voice was careful, professional. But Amara noticed the hesitation. She always noticed the things he tried to hide. I know, she replied. Those 2 words landed harder than he expected, because suddenly Julian realized something uncomfortable. This meeting wasn't a surprise for both of them. It was only a surprise for him. Amara had known he would be there. She had prepared for this moment. She had spent years wondering what she would say if she ever saw him again. Not because she wanted revenge, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because there was a truth that had been waiting longer than either of them realized. 6 years earlier, Amara Bennett was not the powerful CEO sitting at the head of the table. She was a woman who believed love meant standing beside someone through their hardest days. When Julian's company faced pressure, she was there. When his confidence disappeared behind long nights and impossible decisions, she reminded him who he was. She never cared about his family name or the money attached to it. She cared about the man behind the success. But somewhere along the way, Julian stopped seeing her as his partner and started seeing her as another problem he needed to solve. And the person who helped him see her that way was someone he trusted completely. Why now? Julian finally asked. Amara looked down at the documents in front of her, then back at him. Because for years, you believed a version of the story that was never true. Her voice remained steady, but there was something beneath it, pain that had never fully disappeared. And because you deserved to know what really happened. Julian felt a familiar weight in his chest. The same feeling he had ignored years ago when Amara begged him to listen. The same feeling he buried beneath work, success, and everything he built after losing her. Amara, he stopped. For the first time in years, Julian Whitmore had no prepared answer. No perfect explanation. No strategy. She closed the folder in front of her and stood. The meeting can wait. She paused at the door. But the truth shouldn't have to. Julian watched her walk away, realizing something he never expected. He thought this was a chance encounter. A coincidence. A random moment from a past he had already buried. But Amara Bennett had not spent 6 years forgetting him. She had spent 6 years waiting for the truth to finally have a place to be heard. You cannot rewrite history, Julian. But you can decide what you do after you finally learn the truth. Amara Bennett's words stayed in Julian Whitmore's mind long after she left the conference room. He remained standing there, staring at the closed door as the executives around him quietly gathered their papers. Nobody wanted to interrupt him. Everyone in that room had just witnessed something they did not fully understand. The confident CEO who always had an answer suddenly looked like a man who had just discovered a missing piece of his own life. Mr. Whitmore, should we continue the meeting? One of the investors asked carefully. Julian looked back at the presentation screen showing Bennett Innovations' proposal. A few years earlier, he would have focused only on the numbers, the market potential, and the opportunity. But now every detail reminded him of one impossible fact. Amara had built all of this while he was busy believing she had ruined everything between them. Give me a few minutes, he said quietly. After everyone left, Julian sat alone in the conference room. His phone rested on the table, but he did not reach for it. For the first time in years, he did not know who to call. His assistant, his attorney, his business partners. None of them could help him answer the question that kept repeating in his mind. What really happened 6 years ago? Across the city, Amara Bennett stood inside her office overlooking Manhattan. Her company had grown into something she once only dreamed about. The walls displayed awards, photographs, and milestones earned through years of sacrifice. But there was one thing she had never placed on those walls. A reminder of the life she lost before she built this one. Her closest friend, Danielle Carter, walked into the office carrying 2 coffees. You finally saw him. Amara accepted the cup and nodded. Yes. Danielle studied her face. And Amara looked out at the city below. He looked exactly how I expected. Meaning, like someone who spent years believing he already knew the whole story. Danielle sat across from her. Are you sure you want to do this? That question was not about business. They both knew that. Amara took a slow breath. I do not want to destroy him, Danielle. I wanted him to know the truth. There is a difference. Years ago, Amara had walked away from Julian with unanswered questions and a heart full of disappointment. She had tried to explain herself. She had tried to show him what was really happening around them. But Julian had already made his decision. He trusted the information placed in front of him more than the woman standing beside him. And that choice changed everything. Meanwhile, Julian returned to his office and opened an old file he had not touched in years. Their divorce documents. The agreement. The final messages between them. He remembered reading every word back then, convinced he was protecting himself from more disappointment. But now, reading them again, something felt different. There were details he ignored, questions he never asked, moments where Amara's silence did not look like guilt anymore. It looked like someone who had stopped fighting to be believed. Then Julian found something that made him freeze. A message from Victoria Hale, the woman who had advised him during the most difficult months of his marriage. A message he had never questioned before. He read it again slowly. This time, he noticed something he had missed years ago. The timing, the wording, the way Victoria always seemed to know exactly what was happening before anyone else did. Julian leaned back in his chair, his expression changing as a painful possibility entered his mind. Maybe the person he trusted was not protecting him. Maybe she was protecting herself. And for the first time in 6 years, Julian wondered if losing Amara was not the result of a broken marriage. Maybe it was the result of a carefully hidden truth waiting for the right moment to come out. I trusted you because I thought you were the only person who was telling me the truth. Julian Whitmore stared at the old message on his screen, feeling the weight of those words differently than he had 6 years ago. Back then, he saw Victoria Hale as someone helping him survive the collapse of his marriage. She had been calm when everything felt uncertain. She had offered explanations when he felt confused. She had given him answers when he was too hurt to search for them himself. But now, sitting alone in his office, Julian started noticing the details he had ignored. The messages, the timing, the way Victoria always seemed to appear with information before anyone else knew what was happening. For years, he believed Amara Bennett was hiding something from him. Now he wondered if he had been the one living inside a carefully created illusion. The next morning, Julian requested every internal record related to the final months of his marriage. His legal team was confused. Is there a specific concern you want us to investigate? His attorney asked during their call. Julian looked through the glass windows of his office, watching the city move below him. I need to know if the information I based my decisions on was accurate. There was a pause on the other end. Are you questioning the divorce agreement? I am questioning whether I ever knew the full story. Meanwhile, Amara prepared for the second meeting with Julian. She knew he would have questions. She knew he would want explanations. But she also knew something important. Truth did not erase pain. It did not magically repair years of silence. It only gave people the chance to finally understand what happened. Danielle walked into Amara's office carrying a folder. Everything you asked for is here. Amara looked at the folder but did not open it immediately. I thought I would feel relieved when this day came. Danielle sat down across from her. Do you? Amara smiled slightly, but there was sadness behind it. No, I feel tired. That answer surprised Danielle. After everything he put you through? Amara looked toward the window. Because I loved him. That is the part people do not understand. You can be hurt by someone and still remember the good parts of who they were. 6 years earlier, Amara had not walked away because she stopped caring. She walked away because she realized she could not spend her life trying to convince someone to see her value. Back then, the hardest moment was not signing the divorce. That evening, Julian arrived at Amara's office for their private conversation. This time, he did not walk in like a CEO entering a negotiation. He walked in like a man looking for answers. "Thank you for meeting with me," he said. Amara nodded. "I think we both know this conversation is overdue." Julian placed a document on the table. "I found something." Amara looked at the paper but did not touch it. "What is it?" "A series of communications between Victoria and members of my company before our divorce." His voice became quieter. "She was not just giving advice. She was shaping what I believed." Amara stayed silent. Julian looked at her, waiting for a reaction. But she only said, "Now you understand how it feels when someone controls the story before you ever get a chance to speak." The words hit harder than any accusation, because Julian knew she was right. Then he opened another file, one he had just received from his legal team. Inside was a record that changed everything. A piece of evidence showing that the betrayal he believed came from Amara had actually started somewhere else entirely. Julian slowly looked up. "Amara, there is something I need to ask you." She met his eyes. "What?" His voice dropped. "Why did you never tell me this before?" For the first time that night, Amara looked away. Because the answer was not simple. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was a truth she had carried alone for 6 years. And Julian was finally ready to hear it. "Because I knew you would not listen." Amara Bennett's answer was quiet, but it carried more weight than any accusation Julian Whitmore expected to hear. He looked at her across the conference table, waiting for anger, disappointment, or even blame. Instead, he saw something much harder to face. Acceptance. The kind that came after someone had already cried all the tears they had left. "You really believed I would not listen?" Julian asked. Amara lowered her eyes for a moment, remembering the woman she used to be. The woman who sat across from him 6 years earlier, trying to explain herself while he had already made up his mind. "Julian, I did not need you to agree with me," she said. "I needed you to ask questions before deciding who I was." The room became quiet. Julian had spent years thinking about their divorce as a painful ending between two people who simply could not make their marriage work. But now he was beginning to understand something uncomfortable. Maybe their marriage did not fail because they stopped loving each other. Maybe it failed because he stopped trusting the person who loved him most. Amara opened the folder Danielle had prepared. Inside were records, timelines, and information she had carefully collected over the years. "I did not keep these because I wanted to destroy you," she explained. "I kept them because one day I wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside my own memory." Julian looked through the documents slowly. The more he read, the more confused he became. Certain conversations he remembered suddenly looked different. Certain moments he thought were proof of Amara's dishonesty now appeared incomplete. "Victoria told me you were planning to leave," Julian said quietly. Amara nodded. "She wanted you to believe that." "Why?" "Because she understood something about you." Amara paused. "She knew you were afraid of losing control." Those words stayed with him. Julian had built an empire by controlling outcomes. He planned investments, business strategies, and negotiations months in advance. But when his personal life became complicated, he did the same thing. He searched for the explanation that made the most sense to him instead of the truth that required him to be vulnerable. "I thought I was protecting myself," Julian admitted. Amara looked at him. "You were protecting yourself from the possibility that you might be wrong." The honesty hurt because it was true. Meanwhile, Victoria Hale sat in her downtown office, unaware that the foundation she had carefully built was beginning to crack. She had always been confident because she understood people. She knew what they wanted to hear. She knew how to make herself look helpful while quietly guiding decisions in her favor. For years, Julian had trusted her judgment. She believed that trust belonged to her permanently. But now, for the first time, Julian was asking questions she could not easily control. When Julian left Amara's office that evening, he did not feel relieved. He felt responsible. He walked through the city streets without calling his driver, something he rarely did. He needed time to think. 6 years earlier, he believed Amara had taken something away from him. Now he realized he might have been the one who walked away from something valuable. The next morning, Julian requested a private meeting with Victoria. She arrived confident, expecting another conversation about business. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. Julian placed a file on the table between them. "I found inconsistencies in the information you gave me before my divorce." Victoria's expression changed for only a second, but Julian noticed. "Julian, I think you are misunderstanding the situation." No, he replied calmly. I think I misunderstood it for 6 years. The man who once accepted her explanations without question was now looking for the truth himself. And Julian was about to discover the one thing Amara had known all along. The truth was never missing. It had simply been hidden from the person who needed to see it most. You spent 6 years believing I betrayed you. Now you are finally asking who convinced you of that. Amara Bennett's words stayed with Julian Whitmore long after their conversation ended. He had spent years believing the past was something he could close, file away, and move beyond. But the truth had a way of returning when people least expected it. And now, every memory he had of his divorce felt incomplete. The next morning, Julian sat across from Victoria Hale in a private conference room at Whitmore Capital. For years, this had been a place where he trusted his instincts. A place where he made decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. But today, he was not there as a CEO. He was there as someone searching for answers. Victoria walked in with the same confidence she had always carried. Perfectly prepared. Perfectly calm. You sounded serious on the phone, she said, taking a seat. Is this about the Bennett Innovations deal? Julian looked at her for a moment before answering. No, this is about Amara. A small pause followed. It was brief, almost impossible to notice. But Julian noticed. What about her? Victoria asked. Julian placed a folder on the table. I reviewed the information you gave me before my divorce. Victoria glanced at the documents, but did not touch them. And some of it does not match what I found. Victoria leaned back. Julian, I think you are letting old emotions affect your judgment. Years ago, those words would have worked. He would have questioned himself. He would have wondered if he was being unfair. But this time was different. That is exactly what I did 6 years ago, he said. I let someone else tell me what I was supposed to feel. Victoria's expression became more guarded. Are you saying you believe Amara now? Julian looked down at the file. I am saying I do not know what I believe anymore. And that is the problem. Across town, Amara continued running her company while dealing with a past she thought she had already buried. Danielle noticed the change in her friend. You know he is going to come looking for every answer now, Danielle said. Amara nodded. I know. And what happens when he finds everything? Amara was quiet for a moment. Then he has to decide what kind of person he wants to be after knowing it. That was the part Danielle understood most about Amara. She did not want Julian to suffer. She did not want to see him embarrassed or destroyed. She wanted him to finally understand what his choices had cost both of them. Meanwhile, Julian continued reviewing the records. Then he found something that made him stop. A communication between Victoria and a former consultant involved in the company during the time of his divorce. The date was the same week Amara had tried to explain herself. The same week Julian remembered as the beginning of the end. But there was something else. A note attached to the message showed that Victoria had known about Amara's situation before Julian ever heard about it. Julian stared at the screen, unable to move. No, he whispered. Because if this was true, it meant something much bigger than a misunderstanding. It meant someone had taken pieces of the truth and arranged them into a story designed for him to believe. Later that evening, Julian returned to Amara's office. She was surprised to see him again so soon. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. Julian looked different. The confidence was still there, but something had changed underneath it. I found enough to know that I owe you an apology, he said. Amara remained silent. But I also found something else, Julian continued. Something you never told me. Her expression changed slightly. What did you find? Julian took a breath. A record showing Victoria knew about a decision you made before we separated. Amara looked away. For the first time, Julian saw something he had not expected. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Fear. Amara, he said softly. What happened during those final weeks of our marriage? She looked back at him, and the answer she had protected for 6 years was finally close to being revealed. Julian, she said, there is something you never knew about the day I left. And this time, he knew better than to interrupt her. The day you left was not the day our marriage ended, Julian. It was the day I realized I was the only person still fighting for it. Amara Bennett's voice was calm, but Julian Whitmore could hear the years behind those words. 6 years of silence. 6 years of carrying a truth he never gave her the chance to explain. He sat across from her, waiting. This time, he did not interrupt. This time, he understood that listening was the one thing he should have done from the beginning. Amara looked down at the folder in front of her. For years, she had wondered if she would ever open it. Not because she wanted revenge. Not because she wanted to punish Julian. But because some wounds never fully heal when the person who caused them never understands why they happened. The week before our divorce was finalized, I found out Victoria had been communicating with people inside your company, Amara said. Julian's expression changed. What kind of communication? The kind that made sure you saw me as the problem. Amara explained that during the final months of their marriage, Victoria had slowly created distance between them. She never directly attacked Amara. She was smarter than that. Instead, she planted doubts. Small comments. Carefully timed questions. Suggestions that sounded like concern. She would tell you she was worried about me, Amara said. But every conversation ended with you questioning my intentions. Julian remembered those moments. At the time, he thought he was protecting himself. Now he realized he had been looking for reasons to defend a decision he had already emotionally made. Why did you not show me this? He asked. Amara looked at him. I tried. Her answer was simple. More than once. Julian felt the weight of that sentence. Because deep down he remembered. He remembered the nights when Amara asked him to sit down and talk. He remembered telling her that he was tired, that he needed space, that he could not keep having the same conversation. What he did not remember was how many times he had chosen not to listen. I thought you were hiding something from me, Julian admitted. I know. Amara nodded. And that was the hardest part. Not that you believed a lie. The hardest part was realizing you wanted the lie to make sense. Julian looked away. There was no argument he could make. No explanation that could change the past. For years, he had focused on what he lost. He had never considered what Amara lost to. Meanwhile, Victoria realized Julian was no longer responding the way he used to. The man who once accepted her advice without hesitation was now reviewing everything. She called him that evening. Julian, I think this situation with Amara is becoming emotional. You should be careful. But this time, Julian heard the warning differently. Before, he heard protection. Now he heard control. Why were you involved in my marriage decisions? He asked. Victoria paused. I was trying to help you. That is not what I asked. The silence on the phone told him more than her answer could. Back at Amara's office, Julian placed the documents back on the table. I do not know how to fix 6 years of believing the wrong story, he said quietly. Amara looked at him. You cannot fix the past. She paused. But you can stop running from it. Those words stayed with Julian. Because for the first time, he understood that an apology was not enough. Saying sorry would not erase the years Amara spent rebuilding her life. It would not return the trust he broke. It would only be the beginning. Before Julian left, Amara handed him one final document. There is one more thing you need to know. He looked at the folder, but did not open it. What is it? Amara held his gaze. The reason I never came back. Julian felt his heart sink. Because suddenly he realized the truth he was about to learn was not only about Victoria. It was about the choice Amara made after she walked away from him. And that choice had changed both of their lives forever. The reason I never came back was not because I stopped loving you, Julian. It was because I finally learned that love without trust can still break your heart. Julian Whitmore sat quietly as Amara Bennett placed the final folder in front of him. For a moment, he did not open it. He was afraid of what he might find. Not because he expected another betrayal, but because he was beginning to understand how much of Amara's life he had never truly known. What is this? He asked. Amara took a slow breath. It is the reason I left without fighting for you one more time. Julian looked confused. I thought you left because you believed our marriage was over. Amara shook her head. No, I left because I realized I was the only person still trying to save it. Inside the folder were documents from 6 years earlier. Medical records. Travel confirmations, emails, a timeline of events from the weeks before their divorce. Julian looked through them carefully, his expression changing with every page. Amara, his voice became quieter. Why did you keep all of this? Because after I left, I needed to know I was not imagining what happened, she replied. I needed proof that I was not the person everyone decided I was. Those words affected Julian more than any accusation could have. Because he remembered how quickly people around him accepted the idea that Amara was the problem. His family, his advisors, even himself. He remembered how easy it was to believe a story that matched his fears. What happened after you left? He asked. Amara looked away for a moment. I started over. She told him about the months after their divorce. The small apartment. The long nights building her first business idea. The moments when she questioned whether she had made the right decision. But she also told him about the people who helped her rebuild, the mentors who believed in her, the team members who saw her talent, the choices that turned a painful chapter into the foundation of something new. I thought about calling you, Amara admitted. Julian looked up. You did? Many times. She gave a small, sad smile. But every time I remembered the last conversation we had. Julian remembered too. He remembered standing there convinced he was right. He remembered thinking time would prove his decision was justified. Instead, time had revealed what he refused to see. I was wrong, he said. The words came slowly, but they were real. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about us. Amara listened, but she did not immediately respond. Because an apology was not the same as healing. Julian noticed. You do not believe me. I believe that you are sorry, she said. But I need to know if you are sorry because you hurt me, or because you finally understand what you lost. The question stayed between them. Meanwhile, Victoria Hale realized Julian had changed completely. He was no longer asking her for advice. He was asking other people questions. He was reviewing old decisions. He was looking into the past she thought was buried. So she made one final move. Victoria contacted members of the Whitmore board and suggested that Amara's company might create a conflict of interest in their upcoming partnership. She framed it as a professional concern, not a personal one. But this time, Julian saw the pattern. The same careful language. The same hidden intention. When his attorney informed him about the concern, Julian did not react with anger. He reacted with clarity. Send me every document connected to this claim, he said. I want everything reviewed. Later that evening, Julian returned to Amara with a different expression. Not the confidence of a billionaire CEO. The humility of a man who finally understood the damage caused by his own choices. There is something else you need to know, he said. Amara looked at him carefully. What? Julian placed a document on the table. Victoria did not just influence our divorce. He paused. She has been trying to influence my decisions ever since. Amara looked at the document, realizing the story was much bigger than either of them thought. Because the truth they were uncovering was not only about the past. It was about who had been controlling the present. For 6 years, I thought I lost my marriage because we failed each other. Now I realize I lost it because someone else was writing the story for us. Julian Whitmore looked at the documents spread across the table, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was seeing his own past from the outside. The choices he made, the assumptions he accepted, the person he pushed away without giving her the one thing she deserved. A chance to be heard. Amara Bennett watched him carefully. She had imagined this moment many times. She imagined anger. She imagined excuses. She imagined him refusing to accept the truth. But what she saw instead was a man finally understanding the consequences of his own decisions. What are you going to do now? She asked. Julian looked up. I do not know yet. He paused. But I know I cannot pretend I did not see this. That answer mattered more than any apology. Because Amara did not need a dramatic speech. She needed to know whether Julian had actually changed. The next few days became a turning point. Julian did not announce anything publicly. He did not make a statement to protect his reputation. Instead, he started doing the difficult work behind the scenes. He asked his legal team to review the records connected to Victoria's involvement. He contacted former employees who had been present during the final months of his marriage. And slowly, the picture became clearer. Victoria had not created every problem between Julian and Amara, but she had carefully encouraged the misunderstandings that allowed those problems to grow. She knew exactly which doubts to mention, exactly when to bring them up, exactly how to make Julian feel like he was making his own decisions. Meanwhile, Victoria continued trying to protect herself. She scheduled a meeting with Julian at a private restaurant in Manhattan. She arrived confident, expecting the same man she had known for years. Julian, I think you are making a mistake, she said. You are letting old feelings influence your judgment. Julian looked at her calmly. That is interesting. Victoria frowned. What is? Because 6 years ago, you told me the same thing about Amara. For the first time, Victoria did not have an immediate response. Julian continued. You always knew what I should think, who I should trust, what I should believe. Victoria leaned forward. I was trying to help you. Maybe you believed that, Julian replied. But helping someone and controlling their choices are not the same thing. The conversation ended differently than any conversation they had before. Julian walked away without needing to prove anything. He already knew what he needed to know. Later that evening, Julian visited Amara's office. He found her reviewing plans for the next stage of her company's expansion. "You came here to talk about Victoria?" Amara asked. Julian shook his head. "Not only that." He looked around her office. "The company she built. The life she created. Everything he never knew existed. I spent years thinking you moved on because you did not care about what happened between us." Amara closed her laptop. "And now?" Julian took a breath. "Now I think you moved on because you cared enough to stop accepting something that was hurting you." That was the first time Amara saw him truly understand. Not just the facts, the emotion behind them. But before either of them could say more, Julian's phone rang. It was his attorney. The expression on his face changed as he listened. "Are you sure?" he asked. A long silence followed. Then he looked at Amara. "There is one more thing." Amara immediately knew something had changed. "What happened?" Julian slowly lowered the phone. "The information we found about Victoria explains why she interfered with our marriage." He paused. "But it also reveals something much bigger." Amara stood still. "What?" Julian looked at the documents in his hand. Victoria was not protecting her own interests. He swallowed. She was protecting someone else's secret. And suddenly, the truth they had spent years searching for opened a door neither of them expected. The secret Victoria was protecting was never about Amara. It was about herself. Julian Whitmore sat across from his attorney, staring at the final report in front of him. After weeks of reviewing records, conversations, and years of unanswered questions, the truth was finally clear. Victoria Hale had not only influenced his marriage, she had been hiding her own connection to the decisions that changed his life forever. Years earlier, Victoria had discovered information about Amara's growing success and feared what would happen if Julian truly supported her. She knew Amara was becoming someone impossible to control, someone who would not stay in the background, someone who would eventually see through the carefully created image Victoria had built. So she used Julian's fears against him, not with one dramatic lie, but with small pieces of doubt placed at exactly the right moments. The most painful part for Julian was not discovering Victoria's actions. It was realizing he had allowed them to work. "I spent years blaming her," Julian said quietly. His attorney looked at him. "You cannot change what happened." Julian nodded. "I know, but I can decide what happens next." Meanwhile, Amara prepared for a major announcement at her company's annual leadership event. She had built Bennett Innovations from an idea into a company valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. She had done it without needing anyone's approval, especially not Julian's. But when Julian arrived, she noticed something different. He was not there as a powerful CEO, trying to fix his image. He was there as someone who finally understood the damage caused by his choices. "I know you probably do not want me here," Julian said. Amara looked at him. "That is not true." He seemed surprised. "It is not." She shook her head. "I wanted you to understand. There is a difference." Julian took a breath. "I understand now." He looked around the room, filled with people who respected Amara for the person she had become. "I spent years thinking I lost my wife because life became complicated. But the truth is, I lost you because I stopped seeing you clearly." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable anymore. It was honest. "What happens now?" Julian asked. Amara smiled slightly. "Now you learn to live with the truth." "And you?" he asked. "What do you want?" Amara looked around the room. She thought about the woman she was 6 years ago, the woman who wanted nothing more than to be believed by the person she loved. Then she thought about the woman standing there today, a woman who built a life she was proud of. "I want peace," she answered. "And I want to know that if someone chooses me, they choose all of me, not just when it is easy." Julian nodded because he finally understood something important. Loving someone was not about protecting the version of them that fit your expectations. It was about seeing them fully. A few months later, Victoria's influence over Whitmore Capital officially ended. The company moved forward under new leadership standards, with stronger protections against personal conflicts affecting business decisions. Julian also changed. He became less focused on proving he was always right and more willing to listen before making decisions. But the biggest change was not in his career. It was in how he approached people. One evening, Julian and Amara met for coffee at the same small cafe they used to visit years earlier. No cameras, no business discussion, no expectations. Just two people who once lost each other and were learning who they were now. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had known the truth sooner?" Julian asked. Amara smiled softly. "Sometimes." And she looked out the window at the city lights. I think some people need to lose something before they understand its value. Julian nodded, because he knew she was right. The truth had not brought back the past. It had done something more important. It had given them the chance to stop living inside a story that was never theirs. And sometimes, the greatest comeback is not proving someone wrong. It is becoming someone they never imagined you could be.